Okay, we good.
So when are you flying? Are you going?
No, I'm not going to Boston.
You're not going?
No, it's just my mom.
Just your mom.
She was like, nah, this time I only want the kids. I want the kids to stay home. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're supposed to have dinner with Caesar Cruz. My mom's supposed to have dinner with Caesar Cruz at Harvard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I want to start off with a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so our first question.
What do I look at? I look at you?
Yeah, introduce yourself, who we're part of, and then go from there.
I don't have to look over here.
No, not at all.
So my name is Abraham Aguilar, and so here's our question. How long has Homeboy Industries been around, and what types of programs does Homeboys offer?
So Homeboy was started in 1988 when I was pastor of a very poor parish in Boyle Heights called Dolores Mission. So it's been around now we're inching towards 30 years. But this is our fourth headquarters, so we've outgrown, you know. And so it started mainly as a response to the 8 gangs at war with each other in the projects. So I was trying to kind of do something with that. Early days, you know, we'd say nothing stops a bullet like a job. Now, almost 30 years later, it's not so much about employment as it is about healing. So an employed gang member could quite possibly reoffend and go back to prison. But a healed gang member won't ever go back to prison. And so that's kind of, we're kind of dead certain about that here. So, yeah.
So what you're saying kind of leads me to my next question, which says, how does Homeboys address recidivism?
Yeah, so that's the thing. In the early days, we called ourselves Jobs for Our Future. So we had crews, but we tried to find a job for a homie to send them to a job. And it was like dispatching people. Hey, I got a job, go. We didn't hire them ourselves, you know, so we tried to find felony-friendly employers. Some people, they weren't jobs, they were careers, you know, movie business or whatever it was, you know. But the problem was, and I know a guy in particular who we found a career for, and then his lady leaves him. So then he goes to the barrio, he goes to his neighborhood, and the next thing you know, he's doing 125 years to life in prison. And that's because there wasn't any resilience or healing or re-identifying of who he is in the world. So that's why I think this place works. And that's why I think this place has a singular impact on public safety in LA County, because it doesn't just say, here are some services I think you need, anger management and, you know, education and training and whatever. It's not about delivery of services, it's the context of community that's, you know, really about something else, which is mainly healing. Because everybody who walks through these doors comes with a storehouse of unspeakable things that happen to be done to them. And if you don't transform your pain, you're going to transmit it.
Thank you. So my next question is, how has Homeboy Industries been successful where other programs have not?
Well, I think sometimes there's the outsider view that drives the inside of what we do. So the outsider view will say, you know what's wrong with those people? You know what they need? You know, then they'll do a list of things that they think that this population needs. And, you know, we'd probably do a lot of the same services too, mainly because, you know, we have tattoo removal only because gang members asked for it. That's why that started, you know. So, but, you know, it's not the outsider view kind of saying, here's what your problem is, here's what you need. It's more humble. It says, what would help you? What do you think would be helpful? You know, that's why we started the jobs piece, and that's why we started everything here. And so, but I think our secret sauce is the community, you know. And that becomes very compelling because in the end, community will trump gang. You can't just wag your finger at gang members. You can only kind of help them put their finger on it. Oh, I see. I used to think my neighborhood, my gang, my barrio had my back and unconditional love. No, that wasn't true at all. But they could only see that in the light of real community. So this place shines a bright light on the dark corner of their gang past. And that's the only way they're able to say, well, that was bankrupt, that was shallow, that was empty. I didn't know that until I saw the real deal, what real community is, what unconditional love is. Because gangs are about conditional love. One false move and you're out. And that happens all the time. Here we talk about a no matter whatness. No matter what, we got you. No matter what, we have your back. Gangs say that, but nobody believes that. You know? So you ask me one question, I give a long ass answer, and you're going to be done.
Okay.
Oh, you're done. Okay.
Alright, that's on to my question. In Tattoos on the Heart, many stories mention little on school having been a positive experience for the homies. What do you think school should be doing to engage the youth? How do we combat the school to prison pipeline?
Well, I mean, it's not the school's fault, you know, it's just people come to school and they're caring more than most, you know. So I used to watch from Dolores Mission, I'd watch kids walk from Pico Gardens, for example, to Hollenbeck or to Roosevelt. And the walk was a challenge, you know, because people would hit them up and where are you from? I ain't from nowhere. Where do you live? Pico Gardens. They'd beat them down, you know. So I never had to deal with that walking from my house to my school, you know. And that's just because I won some crazy lottery that I happened to be born in 90004 instead of 90033, you know. So that's not because I'm morally superior. It's just I just won some arbitrary lottery that I was born, happened to be born there. Still in the gang capital of the world, Los Angeles. But I wouldn't have known what a gang was, you know, when I was growing up. So part of the education system has to be reverent and for how complex these lives are that walk to Hollenbeck or to Roosevelt or whatever. And so the point always in society is how can you want people to stand in awe at what you guys have had to carry to go to Roosevelt, rather than stand in judgment at how you've sort of carried yourself, you know. And that's the whole story of this population, you know. They've had to deal and contend with a lot of things that most people don't have to. I remember once a guy running for Congress who I was sitting at some fancy dinner and he was yakking the whole night, and then he said, well, what do you do? And I told him about Homeboy Industries, and he goes, don't those people know the difference between right and wrong, you know? And I go, wow, you know, that's so tapado, you know, it's like, that so doesn't understand the difference. And people will say, well, they have a choice. Yeah, you know, choices, not all choices are created equal. So the more you can make choices, the more you can create them equal, the more you can get to a place where the playing field is leveled, you know, the better. So, you don't remember this because you weren't born, but, you know, this population was so hugely demonized. It may be still, but not like before you were born. When were you born?
98.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, and 10 years before you were born, you know, this was clearly the most, 10 years until you were born. And that was the decade of death, which is interesting because the decade of death was 88 to 98. Death. I had 8 funerals in a 3-week period, shootings morning, noon, and night. So your uncles remember this, you know. They remember it in the projects. That's all there was from 88 to 98. And then in 98, people who were your age in 98, you know, had fatigue. They started to go, oh, we're so tired of this. So there are a lot of reasons why we went from 2,000 gang-related homicides in the county in 92 to, you know, whatever we're at, 300. Part of it was policing is different, program like this exists, but there was fatigue. Now the interesting thing is, now it's exactly your age, now, where nobody remembers the fatigue. Only our age, oh, if the, you know, I don't mean to say that you're 62, but only kind of an older group remembers the fatigue, you know. And now your age, high school seniors, they don't remember the fatigue, and they don't remember the decade of death. So now we're starting to see again, it'll never be as bad as that, but we're seeing a spike. We're seeing the presence of it like we haven't seen, and a lot in Boyle Heights right now. So in my staff, we were saying, why do you think that is? And that's kind of part of my theory, is now we're at the age where people forget the fatigue, and they certainly forgot the decade of death because they weren't born. So, so you brace yourselves. We're not in that place like we were 20 years ago, because because there was no hope 20 years ago. And this is only about a lethal absence of hope. So before Homeboy, truthfully, there was no exit ramp off that crazy freeway. You couldn't get off the freeway. Even if you said, I'm tired of gangbanging, there was no exit ramp. And what did that do to the despair of an individual gang member? It compounded his despair, and it increased the violence. Now, 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors, but not every gang member has. But the fact that we exist, it has an impact even on the gang members who never walk through our door, because it's exit ramp. It's possible. Our program is not for those who need help, it's only for those who want it. You have to walk through the door. But, so I think that's kind of, so we won't return to that terrible decade of death. I know we won't. But everybody's texting me every day. They just had a shooting on 4th and State. They just had a shooting. You know, I don't know if you guys are hearing it, but it's happening in a way that it hadn't for a long time. So.
Next question.
When you began your work with Homeboys, why did police officers dislike the work you were doing?
Yeah, and they really did. They did. That's okay, no problem. They did, because they had so completely demonized this population that I was, you know, the friend of our enemy is our enemy. So they had just made me the enemy. Which was weird, because when I grew up in LA, when the cops arrived, you breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, they're going to get the cat out of the tree, you know. But then I came here and I went, oh my God, that wasn't the experience at all. I'd see gang members with their faces rearranged, and I go, damn, what happened to you? Thinking they ran into an enemy. Very reluctant ever to tell me. Then you could finally get it out of them that they had been taken to the factories and beat down by the police for purposes of intimidation and interrogation. And that's how naive I was in the early days. I'd go to the captain at Hollenbeck and I'd go, God, I don't know if you know this. Some of your officers are doing this. Well, then it became, let's shoot the messenger, you know. Cops used to say I was naive. I was naive, but not about gang members, because I knew gang members better than the cops did. I was naive about cops, because I really thought that was my experience was totally different. My experience was, get the cat out of the tree, and you're our hero, and we're glad you arrived. But then I watched how people trembled when they arrived, and I thought, wow, this is really not my experience. But so they hated me because they hated them. You guys can jump around, you know, we don't have any.
Okay, next question. What is your understanding of restorative justice, in 2020, all LAUSD schools will fully implement restorative justice. What do you think must happen for this to be successful?
I don't know, restorative justice, as long as we can broaden how we see things and expand the circle of compassion so nobody is standing outside of it. To talk about mass incarceration and connect the dots, why is it that our prisons are filled with mainly poor men of color? So that's what restorative justice is, where people start to see the dots and then connect the dots. And then you start to move closer to how great that is. I mean, I wouldn't have, that'll be incorporated into the curriculum. And then it impacts how you vote, impacts what you say, impacts what you think, it impacts, everybody gets to move beyond the mind they have, and that's definitely a good thing, But that never happened before, because it used to be good guys and bad guys, and so, and everybody's a whole lot more than the worst things they've ever done. Everybody, not just these guys out here. Everybody in this room, we're all a whole lot more than the worst things we've ever done. And nobody would want to be judged solely by the worst thing you'd ever done, So the good news is, especially for those born in 1998, is that we make progress. Sometimes we get discouraged thinking like nothing will ever change, but things are changing all the time. It's kind of a heartening thing. People get burned out and they give up because they go, oh, it'll never change. I go, I've lived in LA almost all my life, except for school and stuff, but when I was, in the 5th grade, we had smog alerts. We had to go inside the house. We couldn't breathe. We couldn't do sports. Now, none of you have ever had that experience growing up in LA. And that's because things changed. People started to address emissions or whatever the heck. And the same way, in 1988, this population was completely demonized by everybody. And no one would hire them, period. Because they were the demon. Why would you hire them? Now, like even fundraising for Homeboy, we're like the Bernie Sanders of, people will send a check for $27, a lot of them, and so, because they feel like, hey, we get it, we like this. Then they go, Homeboy Industries is smart on crime. But before you were born, it was, which camp are you in? Are you tough on crime or are you soft on crime? Nobody talks that way now. We've had a year of presidential debate. Not once have they talked about it. And the last time they did was, you have to go back to the first George Bush, where they talked about, are you tough or are you smart? Are you tough or are you soft? Now nobody cares about that. They only care about smart. Well, that's progress. Who would have thought we'd ever get to that place where politicians would want to support this place because, well, we don't want to be soft. Nobody thinks that way. Well, that's heartening, I think. Anyway, I don't think we think that way. We always think nothing is going to change and stuff is hard. Of course it is. But it's for the long haul, incremental. Can you put one foot in front of the next? Otherwise, you give up or you burn out. And then people care about being successful.